Hey guys, I'm back again. I just got something in the mail today, and this is a very, very special treat today. Um, this book I'm going to show you has a very extensive history, special history. The book itself is really not too exciting, um, outside of it being a pre-1940, pre-hero book from a prominent DC title. Um, it's not a book that I would normally buy. It's not a title that I'm interested in. Um, but this book comes from a very, very special collection. And what you're looking at here are two important markings on the front cover of this book that really help to prove and validate where this book came from. In 1927, a young boy was born on a farm in Nebraska, and he started reading books. And in 1936, his reading really caught on, and he started reading comic books from 1936 to 1941. He would have been about 9 years old in 1936. He really didn't collect comics, but he enjoyed reading. And his parents would take him to a drugstore called the Krutz drugstore, or Krutz drugstore. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And he started buying random comics here and there. And then one day the owner of the drugstore, his name was Fred Krutz, he said, "Hey, you know what? So you don't miss any of your favorite titles, I'll just set them aside for you. I'll write your name on the front of all the covers. And when you come in every couple of weeks or every month, whenever, I'll have them for you." So that's what happened. And so between 1936 and 1941, this boy amassed 1,005 comic books. And the unique thing about this young man is he was very meticulous about taking care of his things, especially his comic books. And he took care of his comic books. He read them, stored them away in a box very neatly. Back in those times, in the golden age times, comic books were 10 cents. So at 1,005 comics, his parents invested $100.50 in this young man's reading comprehension. And if you look closely here, let me turn this around. You can see a name here. Can any of you guess? I'm not quite sure, since a lot of the YouTube community, I think, is more Silver Age and Bronze Age. I'm not quite sure if you guys have any experience in this area, but the boy's first name was Lamont, Lamont, and you can see that written in script right here in pencil, Lamont. His last name was Larson. So what I'm talking about is the Lamont Larson Pedigree collection. Up until 1940, the staff worker at the Krutz drugstore would write the boy's first name generally on the front of the cover. And then he died, and in 1940, a new store worker was hired, and typically he would write the boy's last name, Larson, on the comics, or sometimes L. Larson. So there's a combination of of writings that you may see on a Lamont Larsson pedigree. If you see the name on a comic, please don't erase it because it clearly identifies the book from that collection. This happens to just say Lamont on it. I've seen Lamont, I've seen Larsson, I've seen Lamont Larsson. And it's always in script in pencil. The other way that you can identify a Larsson book is by the callback number that was written by the drugstore. In this case, we're talking about the title More Fun Comics, which was a DC title. More Fun number 50 to be exact. And the callback number was 73. And that was just the number they used to reorder more issues of that particular title from month to month. Now, there's different callback numbers. I think for Action Comics it might have been 70. For Detective, I think it was 72. I can't really remember, or nor am I familiar with all the callback numbers. But 73 was the particular callback number at the Kreutz drugstore near Omaha, Nebraska in the 30s and the 40s. So that's another way of identifying it. Some of the earlier Lamont Larsson books don't have the signature. I'm not an expert at all on these pedigrees. John Burke is actually one of the renounced experts in the pedigree collection of Lamont Larsson. He's a collector in Connecticut. And so going back to the story, these books were basically stored in a barn for about 35 years. After Lamont stopped reading comics in 1941, his mom put the boxes of comics in the barn. And around 1971, after his dad passed, Mama Larsson decided to clean out the barn. And again, there's 1,005 comic books sitting in, I imagine, various boxes. The preservation of these books was incredible. And you would think, well, being in Nebraska, you have really harsh winters, really humid, hot summers. I would think that these books would be torched. Well, number one, Lamont took very good care of his books, so prior to being put in the barn, they were already in pristine condition. The Lamont Larsson collection has a wide variety of grades. Typically, to make a pedigree collection considered a pedigree, you've got to have a large number of comics. So you can't just have 5 comics and say, hey, this is a pedigree collection. The Mile High collection found in Denver had about 25,000 comics. The Riley collection, or the San Francisco collection, had about 5,000 comics. So this is a smaller pedigree compared to those at 1,000 comics. But anyway, those comics have to be a large number, and they have to be original owner, meaning that person had to have bought them firsthand from the drugstore or the market, wherever they got them from. And Lamont did that. And the third thing that has to be a criteria for a pedigree is that they have to be in immaculate condition, which I believe most of the Larsons are in 9.0 grade or higher. But some of the Larsons are not, and that's because they were stored in a barn, and there was some water damage that was done to some of the Larsons. So some of the Larsons are mid-grade, and I was able to get this book at a pretty good price because of some of the damages that I'm going to show you. So anyway, this is More Fun 50, December 1939. Just to give you a little bit more on the story, so the grandmother or the mom sold all the comics, and these are stories that I've heard, and these are stories that have been documented on different websites and from collectors that I've talked to over the years. She sold the books, I think, initially to someone that she had hired to clean out the barn in the early 70s. And I think it was for a measly sum, probably less than $100 or something like that. Again, we're talking about a lot of the big Golden Age keys that are in this collection. Action 1, Marvel 1, things like that. And then from there, it went to an antique dealer, I believe, in Iowa. And some of the details I'm not quite sure of. And then at some point, finally a major comic dealer from Ohio got a hold of the collection, I think in the late 70s sometime. And then it started to get piecemealed out and broken up at that point. So that's kind of the story of the Lamont Larsen collection. Very typical defects that you will see on a Larsen is what we call foxing. And Burko 1 is very familiar with foxing because he had some on his FF6, but foxing is just some mold that builds up due to moisture damage. And again, you got to remember that these books were in a barn for 35 years, and you'll see a lot of the foxing, the spotting that shows up on a lot of these covers. The spine is pretty immaculate. Show you guys the spine here. It has the feel of a high-grade book, probably around an 8.0, not too high grade. There's some foxing right there on that top staple. But I'm going to show you a big defect that's really going to bring the grade down on this, which doesn't really bother me at all because, as the American pickers say, you're buying the story, which is really important. I kind of like this. It's a real cool leather helmet football cover. This is a really tough book to find. I don't see too many more fun 50s. But the defect I'm talking about is right here. A real nasty hole that goes to the front cover and about the first 6 or 7 pages. But it doesn't really affect the story too much, just the side of the margin. This copy was probably stuck maybe at the very bottom of one of the boxes in the barn. And it looks like either a mouse or some sort of insect chew got to that part of the book. And so that's why this book was really downgraded, and I got it for a pretty good price. But it's a pretty cool book. The story is really fantastic. Let me try to get this to focus, guys. The story is really fantastic, and again, it's not a book that I would normally have bought. It does have a Fred Gardenier signature right here. Let me focus that. There you go. Gardenier. Fred Gardenier did a lot of the early Golden Age art. He did the cover to Action 15. Other books that were on the newsstand in December 39, which would have been November 39, Action 19, Detective 34, This More Fun 50, and Marvel Mystery Comics number 2. Some of the notable books that were out on that at that time. Most Larsens display white pages, and this book is no exception. You can see there the hole through the cover. And there's the foxing I was talking about. You guys see those spots at the bottom edge of the inside front cover? That's the mold that is very, very common on Larsen books. The pages on this are pretty white. Not as white as the backboard you see there, but they are very supple. And there, right there, you can see part of the hole there. And that actually is the only panel that it affects the story art on that word bubble. All the other 6 for 6 pages, it goes a little bit into the first panel of the art, but it's not too bad. You can still read it. This book is loaded with 11 stories. It's not superhero. It's all random stories, pre-hero book. But it's still good nonetheless. I just really like the early pre-hero books. Let me show you guys a few more of the pages here, and you can see how that damage is right there, and it just goes in that first panel. The paper is very supple, and again, for being in a barn for 35 years, you would think otherwise, but these pages are snow white, I'm telling you, and they smell fantastic. And then you could see after about page 8 or so, the damage goes away and you just get some water damage, and then the paper's very sound all the way through. There is a cool ad page I want to show you guys for Flash Comics #1, which was going to be released probably about a week later after this one. Thought that was pretty cool. Here's a Johnson & Smith ad. That's typically the back cover of most of the DCs, but this one happens to be a black and white on the inside of the back cover. So, pretty cool part of history, guys. Larsons do not come up for sale very often, and I was very fortunate to be able to find this one. Let me show you guys the back cover real quick. This book could probably be pressed. There's a little ding up there in the corner. But I'm not going to touch it. The person I got it from had it since 1999, so I'm glad it wasn't going anywhere for the last 16 years, and I'm probably not going to do anything with it either. So the story, again, is really cool. Just the fact that the little boy Lamont had this book and he had read it, and how many times he read it, I don't know, but he took very good care of his collection. So anyway, that's it, guys. Welcome your comments and questions down below, and thanks for watching. And by the way, Lamont Larsen is still alive today. He showed up at a special dinner in 2005 at the San Diego Comic-Con. Actually, unfortunately, I didn't make that dinner, but if you Google his name, you'll see pictures of him in a tie and talking to people. He's a pleasant young man, real nice young man from what I hear. Not young man, older man. And there's some pictures of him as a boy, I think. If you Google his name and you look up comic pedigrees, you'll find a lot more information about the story of Lamont Larsen. Take care, guys. Thanks.